Defaulting to top chat again. Live chat. No. So we'll see how this goes tonight. Brain feels like pudding today. But I'm trying. I'm getting some things done. I'm behind where I want to be, but such is life. All right. Oh, did a lot of brainstorming earlier today for some other projects, but I think I've got most of that worked out and out of my system. Getting back into the pattern of a daily routine that's a little more productive. I did a little chasing down of some information. Like the trick with and I totally understand why. The trick with mental health stuff is like I can look up diet options, and there are hundreds of books published by hundreds of authors about all the different crazy non-logical things and some reasonably working things that people can do to adjust and personally control their diet. But with and like exercise routines, there's like 101 different exercise routines people recommend for this, that, or the other thing. You want a better butt, do this. You want stronger arms, do this. And there's plenty of that kind of information out there on those kinds of things, like exercise and diet changes, all out there. Figuring out what sort of approaches one can take to manage your own mental health, and like you have to know what to ask, because mental health self-care is like, it's not something that's easy to find. So like there's the South Beach diet, the keto diets, the vegan diets, the zone diet. Like everybody comes out with some new gimmicky diet almost monthly. You can find that everywhere. Same thing with exercise. Is somebody says like, oh, well, here's a high intensity and here's a low intensity marathon building skills. And it's just like, there's that crap everywhere. You go on to bodybuilders forums, or you go on to like marathon runners, or you go on to swimming exercises, things like that. Like everybody's got their own pet favorite way of doing this. But with mental health, there's sort of like one brand of mentally healthy that we're willing to accept. Like the things that used to fly over in Rome in the old middle of the Romans' ascent to the greatest heights, the Roman Empire, like they were not what we would consider mentally healthy if we behave that way in modern culture. Like modern culture has a preference for like, can you kind of stick to this set of values? This is sort of where we want you at. And so there's like one brand of that. And there's not a lot of room for like improvisational how-to. Like if you are mentally unhealthy, you go to a doctor. And chances are they prescribe you a medication to even you out. There's not a lot of middle ground for anything else. And where you do end up getting some of those homebrew approaches to mental health, you get a lot of like really weird, like spiritual nutso stuff. Like if you like make peace with the spirits of your ancestors kind of crap on one side, and very cultish stuff on the other side. And, I'll include in the culty stuff uh, some of the self-help gurus that are out there, where they're like, like The Secret. That's not really mental health, though. I mean, that's as close as we get to self-help mental health books, mostly, is this sort of pseudo, like, you can succeed at everything if you just send the message out into the universe, or like whisper the right word into a glass of water and then spread that water into a lake and it'll manifest that. Like, what the hell? Like, why is the weird so drawn to that? Now, I did major in psych. I didn't finish my major, but I majored in psych when I went to college. And my tendency is to resort to a lot of the clinical approaches to talking therapy, but that's not the same as what I'm doing with the rest of this category of content, where I'm talking about, like, try this dietary challenge, try this fitness challenge for a month or a week or whatever, and see if it helps you achieve whatever goal you're going for. Like with mental health, generally speaking, the goal is to not be depressed, anxious, or having mental difficulties with your life. So there isn't usually like 5 different types of, like, you don't go from a bodybuilder to a marathon runner, like I said. There's really just like one cookie cutter approach to what mental health should be for everybody. I don't think that that's a particularly healthy way to do it. But in the course of these videos that I'm hoping to do in the future, whether or not I think there's a healthy way to be different types of people and use a different framework to build a healthy mental state around, that doesn't matter if there aren't existing models to test, to try and demonstrate and review. But so it took me about a couple hours to really kind of track down the right path to pursue here. And I'm looking at a list here now that's like the CBT handbook, overcoming panic and agoraphobia, which is a fear of, it's usually referred to as a fear of going outside, but it's more of going into public. It's more about the people around you for that. Overcoming health anxiety. Flow is the psychology of optimal experience. Declutter your mind, change your brain, change your life. Stop walking on eggshells. The dialectical behavioral therapy skill workbook. Darkness Visible, Reasons to Stay Alive, Wisdom from the Road Less Traveled, the Anxiety and Phobia Workbook, Feeling Good, which is one I am familiar with, Manage Your Mood, Spark the Revolutionary New, yeah, it's too small, I can't read it right now. Coping with Anxiety, Break Free of OCD, Depression Workbook, Depression Cure, Living Life to the Full. So these are all mental health self-help books. There's also Un-F Yourself, and then Get Your S Together, 365 Days with Self-Discipline. I think I just saw one of these the other day in the store. Girls Stop Apologizing. So, um, like like getting some of those books and using them as the foundation for a week, like a read through and a practice what's in the book kind of approach to them. I think I could do that in between uh, fitness or dietary challenges. And so I really kind of, I think I'll pick. I think what I probably should do is go through Amazon and uh, take up some of those titles and enter them into Amazon and see what um, people who bought this also bought books show up, and just sort of build a huge list, sort them by category. So like feeling good, I believe, is a sort of like a cognitive behavioral therapy. So I could chunk that in with other cognitive behavioral therapies. Anxiety and phobia workbook, depression books, dialectic behavioral therapy. That might be a tricky one to decide where it belongs. Declutter your mind. Like there are different sort of categories of stuff. Self-discipline and some of the other ones are like I imagine I could come across like 6 or 7 different categories, and then looking at reviews and sales on Amazon, I should be able to find like the top 2 or 3 in each category and filter based off of that. And by that point, I should have 8 to 10 books on methods of managing those mental health concerns. And at that point, I should be able to just say like, okay, now I can stack those in. Because like if I have 10 of them, that'd get me through roughly a year. And I could probably get upwards of 12. So I could do a year's worth of those in between months of exercise routines and mental or dietary ones. Now, like for me, the important factor is like, are the concerns, or are the topics that are being addressed relevant to me? Because it doesn't do me any good to well, I was going to say it doesn't do me a lot of good to try a system for managing depression if I'm not depressed. But I think all things considered, if you're not a depressed person, trying a course to manage depressive symptoms may lend you some helpful tools in managing your mental health long term. Now, I think things that are going to be pertinent, like I do have some moderate bouts of depression. Procrastination is something I deal with sometimes. And self-doubt, stress, anxiety, imposter syndrome. I do have some moderate OCD tendencies. Getting organized can sometimes be a bit of a trip for me. So, like, I feel like I can do some things in each of those. Are any of my concerns grave enough that I'm specifically getting counted for any one of those? Not really. Not so much. But I mean, it seems to me like uh, as a category of content, this one's a little bit harder to do than fitness and diet. Oh man, I was so tired tonight. Sorry. Um, but I mean, it's like, I mean, there are things like mindfulness and meditation that are beneficial therapies. So I got to look into some of that and figure out what makes the most sense in the long run. I mean, I guess the trick is like, what is it people are looking at in those fields that they want tried out? I mean, I can set up the first 10 to 12 of them, and that'll get me through the year. And in the meantime, I can ask any viewers or any other interested parties out there if they have recommendations for uh, things to try for mental health. Um, Again, you know, it's it's a little harder to do as a trial when uh, like with a trial of a mental health exercise. Like, how do you demonstrate it? Like, how do you demonstrate a course of success? Like, that's one of the tricks when I was studying psychology in college. One of the tricks is like it's very easy to delude yourself. If you are somebody who's in a manic state with bipolar or something like that, it's very easy to convince yourself that you're just um, putting good energy into achieving things. You're not questioning whether or not this is an unhealthy level to be at with something. So oftentimes you see a lot of people in manic states who are on mood stabilizers who take themselves off mood stabilizers because they think they're fine now and they don't need it. Yeah, yeah, there are a fair number of like reasons to study it, and it's not always like. And I think the thing I'm playing with in my brain about this is like I'm not doing the South Beach diet for weight loss or regulating insulin or any of that stuff, but I will be trying it and just seeing what my thoughts on it are. That's that's a viable reason to explore the diet. And I'm not looking to become some bulked out hulk of a man. So, man, that felt weird to say that. All right. Um, so, like when I do like a Thor Marvel superhero workout routine, I'm not doing it necessarily to achieve the result that it's said to achieve. So I feel like that same approach can be taken to mental health. So like even if I don't currently have a suicidal tendency, like reading a book of methods to help yourself work through those tendencies, like I feel like there's no reason I can't do that. But I feel like also at the same time, it makes less sense in the long run for like trying it because like unlike with fitness where it's like I wonder if this makes any sense as a diet or I wonder if this makes any sense as an exercise routine, like That's something you can dabble with. Adjusting how you view the world and think about yourself is less a field to dabble in. I feel like it's a little shakier ground. But I mean, most of these things, they will either have a tendency to give you something to think about yourself and what you do and how you view the world, and give you extra strategies for figuring things out in your daily life, or they won't. And they're not going to convince you to, you know, well, most of them won't convince you to daily devote yourself to some entity that will, you know, manifest something or other in your day. Like, I don't know what some of there are some out there. There are some of these like wonky BS pseudo spiritual books that pass themselves off as mental health books. And I'm always very wary of that kind of stuff because I've seen the tendency to have religions and cults prey on the mentally vulnerable. And I think the main thing I would get from doing any of these books is to say, this is something that you could try and it may help you, and it looks like it has some reasonable exercises in there for managing symptoms like this, but it doesn't show any signs of taking advantage of you or selling you false hope or converting you to some odd mental state. Like, I think that's probably the most I'm going to get out of it. And I feel like I'm a little more hesitant about that, largely because that's more of a category that relies on like being an authority. Like, this is unsafe for you to try is something you don't get from uh, a common, like a fellow internet friend. Like, well, there are plenty of people who offer you that input, but it's given less credence and it's an opinion versus a mental health expert. And so I think doing mental health reviews of mental health exercises and routines has a tendency to risk more of portraying or being misunderstood to be an expert in a given field. And I don't ever want to do that. So that's a very fine line I need to figure out how to walk right. So I got to think about that one. But that's the length I've gone to today, is like really just starting to compile the master list of mental health recommended self-help books that have an appreciable approach to managing mental health that can be like tested. It's not just saying like it's not just telling you that you're okay, and your world may feel stressful. Like motivational talking points and emotional soothing can be great in a book, but it's not something you can try. It's something that either makes you feel better, like they're just like feel good movies, honestly. You watch a feel good movie, you either feel good or you don't. It's not something that you try and test and work on. And so I think cutting it down to a list of testable um, courses that I can try over the next year. That's sort of where I'm at right now, is figuring out which ones make the most sense for doing that with. And so I spent a chunk of today doing that, but I also spent a huge chunk of today looking at a few other things, to be honest. Um, one of the things I've been playing with is sort of like another channel's content where I mean, for this channel, I have the I've been doing the approach of doing the weekly exercises, and there was a similar idea I had for something else where like daily, I felt like it would be fun to do just like a Sunday brunch, minimalist Mondays, tutorial Tuesdays, workout Wednesday, top 10 Thursday, future Friday, and scheduling or planning for Saturdays. So in that case, what it would be like would be minimalist Monday would be like ideas on minimalist approaches and ways you can adapt minimalist philosophy and tricks in your daily life. Tutorial Tuesday would be like life hacks. Workout Wednesday would be just sort of like a regular blogging of fitness and health routines. Not quite the same thing as what I'm going to do with the workouts testing. The top 10 Thursdays would be sort of like a like I've seen a lot of those top 10 videos, and they're out there, and that's sort of the reason why I'm looking at this as a potentially a different channel's content. Is like I like what I do with this channel, even like the Views Day Tuesday, where I view movies. Like, if it never gets viewers, that's fine. I'm liking what I'm doing with this. This is as much for me as it is for anybody who hops in and enjoys it. But there's also a whole slew of techniques and strategies for doing more entrepreneurial and I don't know how to phrase that without being offensive, but I feel there's a lot of stuff out there where it's like the get as many viewers as possible and build a entertainment brand. And I'm not really all about that kind of stuff. Not on this channel. I'm not on the Maker channel that I do. I'm not big on that kind of like turn it into an entertainment business or an entrepreneurial recommendation channel or something like that. But like I do kind of want to dabble with that, but I don't want to contaminate this channel with that. And with that in mind, months ago, I did a like offshoot channel of this one. I started it. I haven't put anything in it yet. So like with YouTube, you have the ability to do your main channel and then like some side channels that are paired with your main channel. So under the same identity that I use here, I manage two channels here. On the other channel, I do something similar over there. That one is I'm doing my maker tours on that channel, and I'm doing, hopefully in the near future, like tinkering projects and learning skills projects. And so that's content for every day. That's all it needs to be, and that's its focus. But I also have an interest in science, basically the STEAM. And so it's like science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics. And so for each of those things, like doing a science exploratory video, or like science fair project demonstrations, or demonstrating math skills. So like for math, like Vihart, she does some great content for math and nerdy geometry geeky stuff. There's the Sci Show by one of the Vlog brothers, Hank Green, I think, or Veritasium, or those types of things. Technology, engineering, do arts. I think one of John Green's wife does an art program on a channel on YouTube, and so like exploring that from like an educational and learning perspective, that's cool, and I want to do it. I think I can't believe I'm going to use this phrase, but I think it's off-brand from tinkering and talking with hobby makers and career makers. Like, I think it's a little bit of a different venue. And so in an effort to prevent that one from cluttering up the Roving Jack channel, I separated that out into Steaming Mad, and that one's managed by, like, the Roving Jack is my master channel, and Steaming Mad is a parallel managed channel. Doesn't have any content on it yet because I haven't figured out the way in which I'm going to do that. I have some ideas for some huge projects to do for that, but it's like I started it, and it's a side channel that when I get the chance to get to working on the content for it, is going to be distinct and like have that divide between it so I don't clutter or confuse my channels too much. And doing something similar for this channel, where my goal is to look at pop culture or entertainment media and things like that, explore them and use them to generate ideas for new content, and like these live videos, regularly doing creation and demonstrations of how you can use some of this stuff, and live updates on the progress of those projects. Like, that's what this channel is good for right now in my mind. So this idea of doing like some of this other content, I think would detract or confuse this channel, which is already, I think to a certain degree, a little confusing for some people, because it's not just book reviews, it's not just movie reviews, it's not just a board game channel, it's not just a product review channel, or an art or a music channel, or a video game playing channel. It's all of that, and I feel like it can be somewhat, like, if you come for video games, you don't care about the rest of what I'm doing. And so you're going to get one video per month, roughly, about video games. And for some people, that's like, that's not really what I'm looking for right now. So, like, it's already cluttered and confused for some people. I don't know that adding things like a daily motivational video followed by a midday, like if it's a Monday, it'll be a minimalist video. On Thursday, it would be a top 10 list. And then at the end of the day, doing some challenges like one of the things I was researching earlier today was how much does the average American spend for a food budget per week, and break that down into a daily cost of living for food. Now, there's something that was occurring pretty regularly for a few years. I don't know if they still do it each year, but there's like the $1 a day challenge, where they talk about, like, in a lot of countries where there's food scarcity and low economic capability for most of the population, they live off of $1 a day, and that gets their food and water for the day. And so there each year for I think like a week or a month, they do a challenge. Can you live off of $1 a day? And like that question, like if we look at the United States, the average, the median, it's the median really. It's not the average, because average is skewed by the higher end of the spectrum. But most people in America spend about $7.64 a day on food, and that's 140 something per week, and per month it's over $320 a month. So most people's food budget for a month is over $320 a month. And so per person it's about $7.64 a day for food. And I'm like, okay, so like the $1 a day challenge would be neat, but also like a more reasonable $5 a day challenge per day for a week would be neat. And then there's the question of like, can you find a way to eat for free for a week? And then doing challenges like everything you do in a day costs less than $10. Not just food, but like activities, transportation, all that stuff. Doing things like less than $1 a day in a city. Can you have a full productive day for less than $1 a day in a city? Can you live for free for a day in a city? And then there was that exercise somebody did a few years ago where it was, he started with a red paper clip, and it was this game that some kids play. It's, can you trade this paper clip for something bigger and better? And I do think I need to do an intro video. And like I know, I have a tendency to overcomplicate projects, and I've had an idea for a while of changing the banner, changing my logo regularly, and also having a channel trailer, which most channels have a channel trailer to tell you what the channel's about. And I feel like I should be able to do one of those, and I've made it more complicated than it needs to be, so I should just bang out one in the next week or so. But and I need to work on the intro for each of my videos. Like the intro for the recorded and edited videos, I feel like it's like welcome to Inspired. It should be something like welcome to Inspired Content, the channel where we look at pop culture, video games, etc., 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 and review them, but then break them down for ideas so that you and I can create new content inspired by this. And this episode we're looking at and then at the end of the video have a closer where I also lead to some of my other videos, but also state, and if you're interested in looking at more content about this category, the playlist is up here. And if you're looking for any information or any other things like movies, games, such and such, click on the link on the bottom. And if you're interested in catching more of my videos, click here to subscribe. That's all stuff I know should be done, but I've somehow made it more difficult to do than it needs to be. So just banging out a simple version and improving it as I go, I should probably just be doing that right now. But like for the yeah, it was he started with a paperclip, kept trading for different things of increasing value, and ended up trading. And he got a house, I believe. A local town traded him. I think he had like a van or something, like a moving truck or something, and he traded that to the town for a house. And so the whole thing was like trading from a paperclip all the way to a house in like a year or two. And so projects like that, they're things I want to play with. They're things I kind of want to do, but they're not on brand for this channel. I hate that phrase. I really do. I don't want to think of this channel as a brand. I want to think of it as like a communal work group for creative people. But some of the things I want to do are things that think along the lines of brand image and that kind of thing. So doing like the other channel I have for this one is Opportunity Forge. I believe that's what I named it. I'll have to go back and look. I started it 4 or 5 months ago, I think, and I haven't gone back to it yet. Yeah, there's and that's the thing is a lot of it's sales, and I'm not a sales person. Like I know I could do it, but for what I'm doing most of the time, I'm an artist, I'm a creative person, I am sometimes a teacher, and all of those things are things that I do for emotional and intellectual value, not monetary and conventional success standards. And so I'm always a little hesitant to venture into those fields because they're not things I can't do. Like I understand enough about psychology and sociology that I could be very manipulative. I don't want to be that way. But one of the things that triggered this thought process in my head at one point was um, like, there are ways I could do this that aren't manipulative and abusive. Like, I look at a lot of like the Tony Robbins and those self help gurus, and they'll sell you these week-long workshops at a resort for $20,000 to tell you how to manifest the positivity you need in your life. And I've read some of those books. And to be perfectly honest, all of them use relatively the same formula. And it's all a bunch of hocus pocus. And it's done to sort of give you a placebo feeling of like your life has meaning while enriching the person who gave you that placebo. And like, that's me being overly negative about some of this because there are some ways that they can be. Some self-help stuff does help some people figure out how to work through some of their struggles in life and help them figure out where they want to go in life. There's some potential value in some self-help. Filtering through all the BS, I think, is something that I could probably get behind. I could do some of that. And with that in mind, I did a little looking around a few months ago, and I sometimes wander into some of these things. And there's a guy online I saw a few years ago, and I've watched a few of his videos where it's like how to make $100 a day using Pinterest and Facebook. And like you look into this stuff, and it's just like this is his theory about how, like, because I can tell you, he's not he's not making $100 a day from these 7 different things that he recommends over and over again in new videos every week. If he did 7 different things that each earned him $100 a day, he'd be making $700 a day just from doing those things. And his videos would be super popular because other people could reproduce his results. And if it was super popular, then he'd also be making thousands off of AdSense on YouTube. And he could set up courses that he could sell, teaching people these skills rather than giving free YouTube videos on it. More detailed courses he could sell for thousands of dollars per month from hundreds of viewers. He's not making that kind of money. We know he's not making that kind of money because he wouldn't keep making videos about how to build a Shopify website. He would be moving on to bigger and better things. And so, like, there's a channel like that where the promises are exorbitant and the techniques are glazing over certain things. And so one of the things he talks about in one of his videos is like how to make $100 a day on YouTube without making your own videos. And one of the things he talks about when you go into his video is what you need to do is go look for, when you do a YouTube video search a topic that has a good niche of interested people in it. So like you look up something like fitness and you pull up how many views each video has, organize them by that, take the top 3 videos and look at build a list of those. Then you go in and you do filter your search by Creative Commons or something like that, where it's free for you to download that video, and he shows you a site where you can use to download videos off of YouTube and then re-upload that on your channel. And I'm like, no, not okay, dude, not okay. Now, if you were to do something where you were to look at that and go like, that's sleazy right there. And people do it. People do it all over YouTube. I know plenty of YouTubers who have had their content downloaded and re-uploaded, and people are making AdSense dollars off of somebody else's videos. And there's a struggle. You contact YouTube and you try to go through these channels of closing that kind of crap off. And if you are doing that and you get hit with copy strikes 3 times in a certain period of time, they'll kill your channel. YouTube will kill your channel. And so, like, this is bad advice. But if instead of doing that, you did the Creative Commons video filter search, do everything he says right up to that point, find a video, maybe even downloading that video, and then you cut out sections of that video on dietary advice. So like Dr. Berg's videos. If I took his videos, if he's Creative Commons his videos so that people could take those videos, I take those cut clips out where I can say like, well, this is a part where he's misrepresenting the South Beach diet, where he talks about 6 meals a day. What he's actually talking about is the South Beach diet recommends a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner with 2 to 3 potential snacks of like a quarter cup of almonds in between meals to stabilize you and give you something to feel full if you need it. You're not even required to do them every day. And so I would be taking that clip, playing that clip, and then analyzing, refuting, and explaining aspects that are maybe misleading or not covered enough on that topic. So going through YouTube videos and analyzing and discussing the things discussed in those videos with clips from them, that's doable and that's fair. and basically, like, I could do the same thing to the guy who produces these videos like this. I could go in and say, like, oh, so what he's not telling you is the site he uses to make his slideshow presentations is a site that you can use for free, like he says. But if you do use it for free, it'll be watermarked with the name of the company that lets you use their generator. If you want to get rid of the watermark from your channel videos, you have to pay $160 a month, which doesn't make sense. If you want to do something similar, here is a truly free video editing system that you can build some templates in that can let you do that same feature. Here's a way you can do something like this. And so, like, I could go back over channel videos like those and break them down, and that makes a lot more sense to me. And it's a much more responsible, and it's a lot less sleazy. It's still marketing, brand building, and entrepreneurial based, which is none of what I do on this channel. But I do think that I could do something like that on a regular basis. But also on that channel, there was also within the last 3 months, I have been looking at another channel, and I was kind of fascinated. He did a series of videos where he was like, in New York City, starting with $1 in a week, going from $1 to $100. No. Yeah, I think that was what it was. $1 to $100, or $1 to $100 a day, and then it was $1 to $1,000, or maybe it was $100 to $1,000 in a week. And so he did a couple of these projects where he did stuff like that, and I thought they were kind of really interesting. And like, I could see in some of them where, like, again, there's some maybe misleading going on, where you gloss over the fact that, like, in one of his videos, he says, like, oh, I have this idea. It was during the $100 to $1,000 in a week project. And he goes, I had this idea to do a line of T-shirts. And so he says, like, okay, I'm doing some research on the market I want to hit with the T-shirt line. I found a couple of places where I could get the T-shirts made. I contacted them, arranged to do this stuff, and then this is the website I'm setting up to do the sales through. And so he's talking about how he's doing all this. The thing is, most of those sites need 24 hours to background check the sources of material and sales going through. You can't just not have it already established and go from no website with T-shirts on it to a website with T-shirts on it. You just can't do that in a day. But if you start a store and you have content, or if you start a website, get all the background checks, establish a payment method, do all of that stuff first before the day that you generate the idea for the shirts, market with an artist to create them, etc., etc., etc. Like, you can do all the grunt work in a day, but you have to have the site set up beforehand. And so I looked at his content like that, and I said, like, you know, I mean, looking at his stuff, you're like, okay, maybe he's like hiding the details of, like, he had the website before he started this project, because you can't do the website in a day. But creating the shirts and hiring an artist and doing the theme and, you know, all that stuff, you could pull off in a day and drop that onto an established website for sales by the end of the day. You can do that. And so I was looking at his content and thinking like, okay, so he's glossing over some things that he's not really telling us. But he did this for a few things. He like one of his, I think it was his 100 to might have been his 1 to 100 in a day each day for a week kind of thing. And he did this like open up a pop-up food thing in a bar. And I'm like, you don't get the okay to just do food production in a restaurant in New York City without going through some very important processes first. And so like he's not telling us everything. And then sure enough, somebody else called him out, and he admits that some of his stuff is like hypothesized off of like he did a few things where he and a friend set up a ethnic coffee stand, like a Vietnamese coffee stand or something in New York City, and they talked about how much they made. And as things unraveled for this guy's channel, it quickly became clear that for a lot of his experiments, what he ended up doing was like he did this wacky idea he had for like an hour and then extrapolated over 8 hours what that would end up being. Now, if you know anything about economics and running businesses, that doesn't work. That is not how things work. You have busy times, you have slow times, you have cost of materials that ramp up if you're doing certain things over long periods of time, and payment of other individuals involved in working on part of these things. And it was just sort of like, wow, you are just BSing so much of this stuff. Like, he'd put maybe 1 or 2 hours of effort into a project on a given day and then tell you, oh, I'm so tired after 12 hours of working on this all day, and I made $500. And what he made was $25 to $30 for an hour of time. And there's no guarantee that for the next 4 or 5 hours, he would have made a red cent. And so it's just kind of like, oh, wow, he's really stepped in it. And then he came out afterwards with apology videos for some of that stuff. And in one of the apology videos, he had a document of corrections he was thinking about making. I think he does a blog. And so he had a screen cap of his computer that talked about corrections that he wanted to clarify how he came to what he came to. And so it details in there like, oh no, the pop-up restaurant was something we did for like half an hour, and we extrapolated what 6 hours of doing that at the bar would have been like. And I'm like, oh, you jerk. I have worked in the food industry, and I knew there was something suspicious about what you were doing. But the sheer gall to tell us that if we wanted to, we could make $100 a day doing this crazy idea without all the legal steps you really need to be taking to do it. And then to find out, you tell people you made $500 that night, and in truth, you made $50 that night, and you were just extrapolating it out. No, 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 no. You don't get to do that. But looking through, it was this big, long list of all the projects he had done. And he scammed on all of them. Hardcore. But the thing is, like, the things he's talking about, like, he has no business telling people how or ways to make them work, because he never put in more than half an hour to an hour worth of effort. But could some things that he suggested to do be done in a real test of doing that? Probably. And, you know, I would have a certain amount of fun seeing, like, could I start with $1 and can I figure out how to make $100 by the end of the day. Can I do that several days in a row? I should be able to figure something like that out. And, it's going to take a lot more grunt work and hard work and maybe some prep and making some connections beforehand. So it wouldn't be like start of the day, spend your first 3 hours brainstorming an idea, then do like an hour and a half contacting people that day, and then sometime afternoon start in on a project that will net you $100 to $400 by the end of the day. Like, no, you're going to plan the day before and establish any websites or any connections or licenses or make arrangements the day before or the week before. There's no shame in doing the prep work beforehand. And, some of the things he did that were sort of like not quite legal for him to be doing that way, it's not a big step to adjust the plan to include the things you need to do them legally. So I'm like, there's some ideas here for content and projects. He did them wrong, and he did them misleadingly, and his advice is not worth anything. But could I do those projects? I might give them a try just to see what I can do. And so, like, again, those are ideas that I had that seemed like a fun thing to explore. And they're not on brand for this channel. So that's probably going to go into the Opportunity Forge channel. And so I was brainstorming that out. So if I did some motivational, meditational, and mindfulness practices in the morning each day, and then each, like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, have their theme days of minimalism or tutorials or top 10 lists or talking about future of technology and social norms. And so each day has their midday content type, and then weekly challenges of, can you eat for $5 a day for a week? Can you take $1 and get $100 a day for a week? Can you, how cheaply can you travel from your local area in a day to how cheaply can you take a week trip somewhere? Because I made that trip to Hawaii very cheaply. And people are chronically like, there's no way you got that cheap a flight to Hawaii and your whole trip cost you less than $1,000. I'm like, I could tell you how I did some of that, and I could do better. I just couldn't do better in the time frame that I set myself. But in the future, do I want to do like, can you travel for really cheap? Like, how cheaply can you travel for a week? That would be a fun week's video to do. Do things like read a book a day, like self-help books or entrepreneurial advice books or those types of things. Do a week-long project of strategies to manage your finances and money in a better way. Build a budget in a day, but a budget week themed project. Some of them would be things like quit sugar or quit social media. Some of them might be like trying out going to thrift stores, finding things that you can resell online. One of them might be something like some people order returns from Amazon, have them shipped to their home on a huge crate, and they pick through that stuff and resell them online. Test them to see if they work. Because half the time, most of those returns are not failure to work. It's somebody got an object and then decided they didn't like it and they wanted to go with a different brand, so they returned it. And so like you can get a lot of functional stuff and resell them for a decent price. And like when you buy them as returns, you get them for pennies of the original value. And so like doing that for a week, like set it up so that I order a bunch, and then like when it arrives, the sorting process and figuring that out, the resale, like I imagine that's something I'll do once. Because having a whole pallet delivered to your wherever you're living, breaking that pallet down, checking and testing everything, looking for any recalls, testing, and then pricing and selling on eBay. It's a job, but it's one that sounds interesting to explore. And you know, like that's not something for this channel. And it's totally something that can happen. Missing DVDs, it'll be what it is. Missing games, damaged games, that'll happen. Um, Swapped out games, like then you just list it as the game it is or the movie it is. It's not a huge worry of mine. And that's the thing, you can make decent money at it. It is essentially the same thing as running a thrift store at that point. Instead of people donating these things to you, or selling you things at a cheap, like you don't go around, you can do the same thing for like flea market finders too. And I might do something like flea market, thrift stores, Amazon returns. I might also do scrap metal reclaiming, just like do it for a week and see what the return on it is. Like that's an interesting, like I kind of want to know what that's like. Like I've done yard sales many times over the last 10 years, and every time I do a yard sale, we get 15 people that drove by where we did our yard sale and ask us, "You got any scrap metal?" I'm like, they drove me nuts. Because, like, look, I'm not selling you every metal object I have on this table for pennies on what, like, I'm not selling you a microwave for the cost of the scrap metal of the steel in it. If I have a microwave here, I'm selling it because somebody needs a microwave. And they drove me a little bit crazy doing that. But at the same time, this must be lucrative. Because if you get 15 people driving by your yard sale on a Saturday afternoon looking for scrap metal, we live in a small state. We don't have a lot of people. So if you're getting that percentage of people going by you on a daily basis looking for scrap metal deals, then there's got to be a sweet deal in doing this at some point. So looking into it, trying it out for a week, trying to figure out how to make that I imagine I'll make enough profit on it that it's sort of on the edge of a part-time job, and I wouldn't want to do it full-time. I wouldn't want to make that my life, but just trying it out to find that out would be worth it for me. And so like that doesn't really work for this channel, so that might go into the other channel. And so like that, and I accumulate books and board games pretty substantially. I love books. I'm a bibliophile. And I have actually thought about for a while starting a used bookstore on Amazon. And that would be another thing I could try. And so it's just sort of like exploring those things. And so I was working on a list of that kind of stuff today, where my strategy was, like, I already figured out what I would need to do for like my morning meditation, mindfulness, and motivation. That's easy enough to figure out. And then I know what I'm going to do during the weekly days. Those are easier enough to figure out. And you can look up uh, other people who are doing those types of things online and see what your competition is doing and do something comparable with each of those kinds of categories. So like workout routines, see what somebody else is doing, and then do something similar suited to your needs and your style. But the weekly challenges, like that's a new idea every week for, in my case, I'm building a list that should be enough ideas for a year. Because for me, like starting something like this, I don't want to start it if I'm not going to be able to have enough content for a year. And so like years ago, I started a web comic. But what I did was I started making a comic in a sketchbook every day until I had enough that I would have, I think, 100 comics before I even started posting them. Because I didn't want to make a comic next week, go like, oh, I didn't have enough time. I won't put it up this week, but I'll do it next week. And then like 3 weeks later is the next comic. And then like, 2 weeks go by and then I do another comic. And then there's just like this scatter shot, not really done. So I built enough of a backlog that when I had enough to do 100 comics, I started posting. And then I continued to post. I think I did like 3 times a week, maybe 5 times a week. I can't even remember anymore. It was so long ago. But I posted regular comics. But while I was doing that, I still made more each day. And eventually, I did get to the point where my life got so hectic that I didn't have enough time to keep making comics, but I still had enough to keep posting. I eventually got to the point where the two met, and then I just stopped making comics. And like I sometimes think about going back to do that comic some more, but it's been so long. I don't know if it makes any sense to do that anymore. And it was a fun thing to explore. If I'm going to do these other channels, the one for Roving Jack where it's the Steaming Mad and Opportunity Forge for this channel, I want to make sure I have the content figured out and started. They might be. The first one is the one I mentioned. I do have, I did another one. I did one that's name was in Irish Gaelic. But let's see. There you go. And the first one here is the Goober, nice to meet you. That was a webcomic I wrote targeted for children. And I shared that regularly at family gatherings with my young niece. And she thought it was fun. So let's see if I can find it on here. See if it pops up in Google. Yes, it does. So, and it's pencil on paper. It's not the best art. It was just goofing around. Let's see, pull that up here. And And that should be a possibly viable link. There we go. And so Roving Jack was the name I did that under. And then the other comic I did was Totha Phoenix, which was the People of the Clear Water, is the sort of translation of that. And it was a mythology-based one I started. And I still have the story for that one worked out in my head that I want to revisit. I definitely want to go back and play with that a little more. See if I can. That one was very good, and I actually think I've been brainstorming in the last year or so about potentially turning it into a video game. The storyline that I wrote for it, anyway. And I think it would make a really good, like you could make a very playable, interesting game off of it. So that one is that. And those were the webcomics I was playing with years ago. And I built those starting out. All right, well, we're coming up at a point where I should probably cut it for the night anyway. But when I did those comics, I created the content beforehand and built a backlog so that I would have a cushion to protect me from, at the time, I had a very unstable living situation and health problems. And so I made multiple trips to the hospital in a few months. And I was chronically, I think I moved 3 or 4 times during that year. And so it's just sort of like, I never had enough stability, and I didn't even have my own computer at the time. The job, the very, very, very part-time job I had a computer lab with a scanner. And so I would make my comics on paper, scan them into the scanner after work every night, and upload them. And so, like, I was doing that, and I made sure I had enough that when things got in the way of me being able to do it, that I could still upload on a regular basis. And I want to take the same approach to doing any additional YouTube content. Now, I have gotten myself into a bit of a pickle with my updates on both my channels currently lagging. And some of that is just stress and organizing some of the rest of my life now. But I'm hoping over this next week to get myself into a pattern of behavior. That's why I've restarted my regular schedule, where I have a routine where I wake up in the morning, I do some breathing exercises, I do a little exercise, I eat breakfast, and from there I devote a certain amount of time to social media access and internet use. And then I cut off internet use pretty much for the rest of the day, unless it's required to do something for the work that I'm doing for the rest of the day. And so I do have like scheduled time to do video editing, shooting new videos. I have some online classes that I want to take. And I give myself some time for hobby time and some time for updating social media for the channels that I have, and then some social time for friends and family, and then a nighttime routine of some stretches, relaxation, meditation, some journaling, a few chores like sweep a little, wipe it down a counter, do a load of laundry kind of stuff, so that if you do that every night, everything will be taken care of by the end of the week. So I have like this scheduled plan of daily activity, and I was doing it for a little while. And then we hit the holiday season, and it was too difficult to make that happen. And then I started to try to get back into it and got distracted by some other things that happened in my life. And then the trip to Hawaii got in the way after I tried to restart it again. And so it's just sort of like, it doesn't always fit well, but when I'm able to make that the way I run my days, I can be very, very productive with my days. And so what I'm looking to do in the next week is get to a point where I can have update content for both my channels going up every day. The live ones on here, the recorded makerspace tours for the makerspaces on the Roving Jack channel, a couple of tinkering projects on Roving Jack, the weekly projects for this channel with the live updates, as well as the edited content for this channel 2 times a week for a month. I think that's where I'm at with that. 4 weeks, 2 times a week, 8 categories of content. That should work out about right. And then in that pattern of behavior, there should be about 2 to 4 hours of video editing a day and about 2 to 4 hours of shooting video a day. So that's about 8 hours of content working. And in a 16-hour day, if I give myself an hour of casual internet use, an hour of socializing, an hour of hobby, I still have a big chunk of time I can play with. And so I can achieve, starting the plan and building out, scheduling and shooting some additional content for some of these other channels, build that backlog that I can post more gradually. And so, I feel like if I can just get myself back on that schedule, I can achieve a great deal in the next month. I'm hoping to achieve enough in the next 2 months that I can actually build up a surplus to help cover me a bit when I'm traveling. Because June through August is going to be the hard spot for me to make work. But that's the plan. And we're running again. I get to babbling at night here, and it's an hour and 23 minutes in. So I should probably call it for tonight, and I will see you tomorrow, I guess. And I think next week I should start planning for where we're going to go with April. April and May project weeks. All right. Well, it was nice chatting with you. I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Ooh, it feels warm in here. It's super warm in here. I'm